Welcome back. Some well-known Western companies are being outed for breaking their promises to leave Russia following Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. A group of researchers at Yale say big names like Heineken, Unilever and Nestle, among others, are still doing business there. The research was shared exclusively with CNN's Matt Egan. He joins me now live. It's one thing to say we're exiting, another thing to actually do it. It's not that easy. We know it means dismantling value chains, supply chains. What does the report tell you?
Well, that's right, Eleni. Turns out that leaving Russia is one of those things that is easy to say you're going to do, but hard to actually execute.
Before they get into this, growing up as a young child, my dad told me a few stories about what went on during World War II. How that if the enemy ever captured you, that a lot of times they would tie you up and they would try to do things to you to make you talk. Especially if they thought that you had sensitive information of the enemy being either attacked or where a group of people was that could possibly cause the diminution or the death of, let's say, 500 people on a boat somewhere. That if you knew where these people was and they was wanting this information out of you, they was going to torture you until you finally either talked or they killed you. And according to the way that I was taught, that at that particular time, being a soldier, you have to recognize your life being a whole lot less valuable than the lives of 500 other men or possibly women of the information that they're wanting to give you, or in exchange towards giving out information that would help the enemy to prepare for the attack. People don't understand the seriousness of war in today's society. And you would think that people in America would understand that, especially due to the fact of the sacrifices that our men and women have made just for us to have our freedoms over here in America. But at that point in time, according to my dad, that if you did expose information that you wasn't supposed to have exposed, and you was still captured, but you got released or you escaped, and once your comrades found out that what that you had done, you would have been better off to have either remained in the hands of the enemy, or you would have been better off if the enemy would have went ahead and killed you. Because what they're fixing to do to you as being a traitor will probably be worser than what the enemy was actually doing to you. People don't realize war is war. Your adversary is your adversary. And whenever somebody draws a line in the sand towards saying this is the way it's going to be, and then you are forced, provoked, in having to make a decision that you rather not make, but now you're forced into making that decision similar towards how our ancestors had to make their own decisions during World War II of creating the atomic bomb. They didn't create the atomic bomb because they wanted to kill 250,000 people. They created the atomic bomb because they was forced in do or die, kill or be killed. And once you reach that plateau that your adversary, your enemy, has put upon you, then you have to make a decision, and you need to make it very quickly in what side of history that you're going to be on. And as far as I'm concerned, what these people that they're fixing to talk about has not left Russia, has not abided to the ethnic rules of war, in still conducting their business over in Russia, as far as I'm concerned, they should be looked upon as being a traitor. And in lots of cases, a traitor is actually looked upon as being worse than the actual enemy. Please listen.
These findings from Yale, it's a big deal because it suggests that there's been an undermining of this unprecedented exodus from Russia by Western companies. Yale is basically naming and shaming some companies that they say have broken their promises to either get out of Russia completely or drastically scale back. Some of the companies named here by Yale include Unilever, Mondelez, Heineken, WeWork, Nestle, Philip Morris International. Now, Yale professor Jeff Sonnenfeld, he's not accusing these companies of breaking the law per se, but he is saying that they are breaking a moral code. Listen to what Sonnenfeld told me.
It's beyond disappointing to the point of shameful and unethical. They're breaking their promises. They're functioning as wartime profiteers, benefiting from the mass slaughter of innocent civilians, showing no concern for their most valued resource, the most valued possession, which is the trust of the institution, the character of the brand. So they're self-immolating their own brand.
Strong words there from Sonnenfeld. Now, his research is based on whistleblowers, corporate documents, even students that are inside of Russia right now. And Sonnenfeld said that Heineken is, quote, the poster child for this problem, because Heineken had promised back in March of 2022 to get out of Russia. And here we are, 500 days plus into this brutal war in Ukraine, and Heineken still has, according to Yale, 7 breweries inside of Russia employing 1,800 people. I reached out to Heineken, and they said in a statement that the war in Ukraine is, quote, a terrible human tragedy. They say they are still committed to leaving Russia, and that they actually had a deal in recent months, a potential deal to sell their assets in Russia. But Heineken says they have yet to get regulatory approval from authorities in Russia. And that has been a common theme from companies that we heard from, that Russia has made it hard to get out. They put up legal regulatory obstacles. Now, another company called out by Yale is Unilever, the company behind Dove soap and Ben & Jerry's ice cream. They pledged back in early 2022 to only sell essential goods, but the Yale research finds that they are selling Cornetto ice cream and other items that could hardly be considered essential. Unilever declined to comment, but they did point to a statement from a few months ago, Eleni, where Unilever said they don't want to hurt their employees who are still in Russia. I brought that point up to Jeff Sonnenfeld from Yale, and he said, look, that's the whole point here. We want to make things uncomfortable for people in Russia so that they look around and ask themselves who is causing this misfortune for them.
Yeah, and it's interesting that it seems to be sort of more weighted on the FMCG space, Matt. Interesting findings. I'm sure you're going to be asking a lot more questions to these multinationals. Great to have you on. Thank you. Germany has announced a $770 million military aid package for Ukraine as the NATO summit kicks off. The pledge includes thousands of rounds of ammunition. It comes as Ukrainian fighters train up on new Western weapons they've already been given. Ben Wiedemann reports.
Whenever it comes to what the Russian government has done, it's actually an act of betrayal, because they could have chosen 1,000 different other methods in trying to resolve this other than resolving it in bloodshed, especially the type of tactic warfare that they have been using that actually goes beyond guerrilla warfare. You know, we look at guerrilla warfare towards it basically being hand on hand, and guerrilla warfare, whenever it comes to stabbing and killing and shooting and blowing people up, That's just about the worst that you can get, other than in today's society, high-tech advancement warfare pertaining to drones, satellites, etc., that today they can actually blow a community up or a village up and never have to step foot on the field. Whenever it comes to the enemy that we have obviously seen again and again and again for the past 500 plus days now, year and a half, of this brutality, in which all wars are brutal. All wars are brutal. Whenever it comes to the goriness of a war. But whenever you purposely target civilians and you're blowing up apartment buildings, schools, hospitals, maternity wards, kindergarten, playgrounds, whenever you are purposely targeting the innocent lives that don't have nothing to do with that war, then you have just stepped off into a brand new, it ain't really brand new, you've just stepped off into a category of being a ruthless, brutal individual. Because now you are willing to go after the lives of the innocent in punishing them because of what your government has desired for you to do. In exchange towards what was just said about people still siding with the Russian government over profiteering issues. No, it may not be actually against the law in what some of these companies are still doing, but I personally believe that they should be exposed. Somebody should expose each and every one of them towards what that they're doing, and if they have any type of dealings with the products here in the United States, they should immediately boycott that product. It doesn't matter how well you like to drink Heineken beer or whatever that they're talking about, these companies. You need to boycott that product, because in still today supporting that product, in supporting that company, you're supporting basically what that company is doing, which is stabbing the American people in the back, the Western world. But not only are you stabbing them in the back, but you're stabbing the innocent lives that I just got through talking to you about, pertaining to men, women, and children, civilian life that didn't have nothing to do with the war to begin with. And in a lot of cases, according to my dad that was in World War II, he said a traitor was looked upon in most cases as being worse than the actual enemy. Because at that point in time, you have done something that violates all principles and reason of doing what you're doing. So this G.I. Joe warfare stuff that a lot of people's got in their minds pertaining to controlled war or staged war, they need to get that out of their minds, because like I said, their president of Russia had the desires in wanting to believe that whenever he invaded Ukraine, that the Ukrainians was going to be like the Afghanistan people that basically surrendered and gave up their arms within an 11 to 12 day period after the American government walked away from Afghanistan. What the Russian government underestimated about the Ukrainians is that the Ukrainians knows both sides of the perspective. They know the side of the perspective of being ruled by a dictator, and they also know the perspective towards their freedom in being able to make their own decisions and being able to work for their own profit rather than working for the profit of some oligarch. And because they have tasted both sides, I'm sure had a big influence on the Ukrainian people towards making a stand, towards saying, you know what, we'd rather be dead than to go back under the tyranny of that evil dictator. Until societies all over the planet are willing to make these same decisions about their tyranny that they're going through, in creating a free, fair, open democracy, such as not only the free world has promoted here in America for the past 240-something years, but also in how other countries have promoted democracy. Until the people are willing to stand up against their own tyranny, democracy is still up against the wall in it being universal worldwide. Now, we can throw off into that imagery that I just gave you towards religious beliefs, regardless whether it's Hinduism, Buddhism, Christian belief, Catholic belief, or whatever. But let's just keep religion out of this for a second, okay? Let's keep religion out of this whole concept and what's going on right now over in Ukraine pertaining to the Russian invasion. I have never in my entire life felt such of a holler, sickening, dehumanizing feeling in sitting back and watching the atrocities being committed upon innocent people the way that I have, and the American people not having no more interest in what's going on over there than about maybe 40% of the people in America. I realize that that is not our war per se, but in another way it is our war, because those people are standing up for their values, and those people are putting their necks on the line and saying, we're not going to cross that line, and we'd rather be dead if push comes to shove in regards to all this. People don't understand and realize, getting off of that subject momentarily, the dangers that I put myself through and the dangers that I put my family through in me sticking out my neck, going to Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, interviewing those people towards what had went on with the 51-day siege, and then going up to Oklahoma and doing my study, my investigating studies up there. And it's one thing to study something, and it's another thing to speak upon it, to speak out upon to it. And I knew at that point in time, by me knowing the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, that it would have been better for me to have suffered the consequences in my people here in America, in which they was already under suspicion for trying to put me under the category of me being an enemy to my own state. But at that point in time, I made a conscious decision that I would rather have suffered the consequences in telling the truth to the world in regards towards what actually went on in Mount Carmel with the 51-day standoff, and also in not only discovering, not only identifying, but in how that I had discovered it, linking back to the documentary called A Noble Lie, that is proof in the pudding that there had to have been more involvement, with the death of 168 people that day, other than a Ryder truck and 3,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate and 2 individuals that created such horror upon to the Native American nation of Oklahoma. Once I identified that there had been government inadequacies happening on both cases, regardless whether it was the ATF and how that they was entrapping those poor people, preying on the minds of the weak down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas, or regardless whether it was the authorities that didn't tell the whole truth regarding the explosion that killed 168 people that day, not counting the people that got mangled, not counting the people that will never, ever get over that type of damage that was committed upon their lives. I would have been better off to have either been dead or suffered the consequences in once that information was given to me, or once I discovered that information and then withheld that information or didn't tell the world about what that I had knew. You see, whenever it comes to being a whistleblower, and no one paid me a penny to go out west, and to this day I still haven't received a penny for my works. But I know that even if I don't receive any type of recognition, worldly recognition, here on the planet, one day in the afterlife, I will be rewarded for my works because I did expose putting the two together in making my case towards what actually did occur, or part of what actually did occur pertaining to the death of 168 people. Now, rather not the authorities over there in Russia, let me get my facts right. Rather or not the authorities over in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, decides to do the right and fair thing with their own citizens is up to them. That will be on their shoulders. That will be, the guilt will fall upon their feet. And that will be up to their citizens in holding them accountable towards telling the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, regarding that 1995 horrible, horrible incident whenever Timothy McVeigh and Nichols decided to do what they done in retaliation towards what had occurred 2 years prior to that down in Mount Carmel, Waco, Texas. The guilt now is off of my shoulders. I have done my part towards being a journalist, investigator, going and pulling up my sleeves and looking at some of the goriest pictures and some of the most tragic testimonies that I think an individual could ever be exposed to. I've done that upon my own accord, putting myself and my family at risk. And today, even as much people that knows about my story, I still feel not just unappreciated, but I still feel ostracized. I still feel as an outcast because I responded the proper way towards the American values in how that our country ever become a country under the statute of the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help me God. And it really irritates me whenever I hear stories like has been talked about today, regardless whether it was a brewery or whatever, that is still conducting business in Russia, knowing the atrocities that's been committed. It just absolutely makes me sick at my stomach to think that there's still people over there that has an American business, that knows the American values, but are still over there based upon profiteering purposes. That is absolutely sickening, and as far as I'm concerned, those people are actually worse than the people that are initiating the orders, illegal orders from their government pertaining to President Putin, that's ordering them to fire upon the innocent civilian life. And I know that may sound to some people as in a bit overboard or overkill. Well, don't you think that's a bit overkill, Mr. Jackson? Whenever you're saying that those people that's still over there are actually worse than the people that's committing the acts of atrocities upon the innocent people? No, I do not. I do not think it's an overkill. Not at this stage of the game. Now, whenever it first all come about and people wasn't aware of what was going on and how that it was going on, then you can excuse people's ignorance. Now, if those people, those same people was captured and at gunpoint, okay, the people working for Heineken, the 1,800 employees working for that one company that they talked about, if those people was under gunpoint, basically being held hostage towards do or die, well, then I could say maybe I can see them still over there doing what they're doing. But because the way that I understand it, they're not at gunpoint. Yeah, they may have some legalities going on, some legal legalities pertaining to the Russian government in whatever selling or giving away or taking away or whatever the property. They may have some legal legalities going on, but that doesn't stop them from doing the proper and right thing, which is walking away. Walking away, because in more ways than one, now you're looked upon as being part of the problem rather than part of the solution to the problem towards bringing punishment to that region. The whole purpose for bringing punishment to that region is just like that individual talked about a while ago, is that hopefully there'll be enough people that will look around and they'll start figuring out, my God, we're suffering here on account of this, all this, ain't we? You know, at one time we used to have this, and this, and now we no longer have that. We used to be able to do this, and now we no longer have that. We used to enjoy this, and now we don't have that to enjoy. And the whole primary principle in behind that is that if it's enough people that feels basically a traitor of their own government that's brought this type of illegitimacies upon to them, that maybe that group of people will bond together and form a movement that will get that government, that power, that administration out of their lives. Because it's very obvious that there's a lot of people that needs to be held in court under war crimes commissions that needs to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And I'm just not talking about the big heads. I'm not talking about President Putin right now and those that circle around him pertaining to his oligarchs. I'm talking about the men and women, providing that there is any women, that gets on the front lines, that's actually pulling the trigger and doing the damages that they're doing, are those that are working with sophisticated armament, such as satellites, because they got the same type of stuff over there that we do over here. And they're deliberately pressing the button, and they're bringing harm and hurt and destruction to men, women, and children that don't have nothing to do with that war. Those same people are going to be held accountable for what that they are doing, committing these type of atrocities upon these people. I don't care if it's Kellogg's cereal. I don't care if it's whoever, if they're still over there in Russia by now, after this length of time, and they have seen the atrocities, because, you know, TV's everywhere. And if it's not TV, it's satellite. If it's not satellite, it's smartphone technology. You can't tell me that these companies, or the owners of these companies, does not know of the atrocities that's going on over there in Russia right now. And for them to still be over there is absolutely appalling. It is appalling to even think that they're still over there, even if they had to take a hit, a financial hit, in which I'm sure some of them will. Some of them will have to take some sort of a financial hit in walking away from that business over there, because they actually may have to sacrifice not just the business, but they may have to sacrifice the property and their equipment in that business. But that's what war is about. Just like if you was captured and they was torturing you and they wanted information out of you, and then you gave them that information, and your one life now costed the life of 500 men or women on a boat somewhere that they wanted to know where that was. Or the information that you gave them was appalling to the people that you're supposed to be representing. Then you're looked upon as being a traitor. And like I told you a while ago, during World War II, I don't know what the deal is today. I think people today wants to play games with G.I. Joe, thinking that war is some sort of a game. War has never been a game. It's never been a game, and it never has supposed to have been looked upon as being a game. War is a very, very, you can't get no seriouser than war.
Long trained in the use of Soviet-era weapons, it's a time of transition to the latest arms to arrive from the West. An American-made grenade launcher, an American-made 50 caliber machine gun.
This exercise is designed to bring together troops fresh from the front around Bakhmut with new recruits to show them how it's done.
Veteran soldier Denise explains the finer points of the machine gun to recruits fresh, but not all young. On the eve of the NATO summit in Vilnius, Lithuania, with the counteroffensive here moving ahead slowly, Ukraine is pressing for more help, and the troops here have some ideas.
We need many weapons, armors, and vehicles.
This commander, call sign Martin, puts it this way. The Russians have an immense amount of old Soviet weapons, he says. They just throw a mass of metal at us. We can't overcome them this way. We need quality and precision. Nearby, other recruits are rehearsing an assault, jumping out of an old Soviet-era armored personnel carrier, advancing under the watchful eye of their sergeant. Mykola served in the Soviet army, then drove a tractor for decades before joining the Ukrainian army a year ago. He says NATO should provide something newer than his old Soviet workhorse.
It's as old as the two of us? Yeah, okay, I can believe it.
Mykola has simple advice for the new troops. Move fast and stay low. And for NATO, just move fast. Ben Wiedemann, CNN, Eastern Ukraine.
And China and so many other points of crisis, and also building on the momentum that he himself had coming back into the prime ministership and surprising all the skeptics. And he said this is an opportunity to just push everything at once. And he did not take into consideration the huge pushback, the strong resistance that his government would meet in the streets of every Israeli city, hundreds of thousands of people protesting, people within the military, in the Air Force, in the special units, in the intelligence saying, we will quit, we will no longer serve if this becomes the law of the land. And of course, also the international reaction. And then he said, okay, let's stop and let's try to do it instead gradually, piece by piece. We call it here in Israel the salami method, like you cut a, you slice a salami into pieces. So now they're trying to push through one piece of it, which is basically taking away the Supreme Court's ability to conduct judicial review over governmental decisions. This is not about legislation right now. This is about what we call the reasonableness standard, the ability of the Supreme Court in Israel to come and say that a decision made by a minister in the government, an appointment perhaps, is extremely unreasonable. I want to give you one example, Zain. Netanyahu is a criminal defendant right now facing his own corruption trial in the Jerusalem District Court. Of course, he's innocent in the Israeli system until proven otherwise, or if he retains his innocence. But theoretically, he could try to fire the Israeli Attorney General who is leading the case against him. Today, it's very likely that if his government fires the Attorney General at the same time that he has a clear interest there, the Supreme Court will say, no, this is an extremely unreasonable decision, and it will strike it down. If you cancel the reasonableness standard, new options open up.
So what does all this mean for Israel's relationship with its allies on the international stage? I mean, particularly in the US, there's so much concern around the world, just given this bill, about the state of Israel's democratic health. I mean, obviously opponents think that Israel is slipping towards dictatorship. President Biden is actually, I believe, hosting the president of Israel, not the prime minister this time around. He's not hosting Netanyahu. So what does this mean for Israel's relationship with its allies?
So today, the legal system in Israel, whether it is the legal advisors to the ministries of the government, and of course the Supreme Court, in a way, it plays a bit the role of a babysitter in Israeli politics. A lot of crazy decisions and ideas that Netanyahu's far-right partners or very ultra-religious partners want to pass stop at the Supreme Court. And for Netanyahu, it's been convenient. I mean, for most of his career, he was opposed to curtailing the powers of the Supreme Court. That changed only due to his personal circumstances. But if the Supreme Court and the legal advisors will be weakened, as the government wants to do through all these different pieces of legislation, someone else will have to play the babysitter role. And of course, most likely, it will have to be the United States. Every crazy idea, every unthinkable and unreasonable piece of legislation or policy will get to the desk of the American ambassador or the American president, and the same goes for the leaders, of course, of other close allies of Israel, France, Germany, the UK. So there definitely is a stake here for Israel's allies abroad to come and say, wait a second, you are changing the structure of your government in a way that could also later on cause international trouble. And just one more sentence about this. For every aspect, for every element of Netanyahu's ruling coalition, there's a different interest behind this judicial overhaul. Netanyahu has his personal issues with the trial. The ultra-Orthodox, very religious parties in his coalition want to make Israel a more religious country, and they view the Supreme Court as a liberalizing force in Israeli society. But there's also a far-right component in the Netanyahu coalition. People like the Finance Minister Smotrich and National Security Minister Ben Gvir. For them, weakening the judicial system is all about the settlements, it's all about annexation, and it's all about passing laws and policies that would severely hurt the rights of Palestinians and not having the Israeli Supreme Court stand in their way.
Amir Tibon, thank you so much. As you're speaking, we were just looking at live pictures of Jerusalem where protesters, I think it's about 7:30 at night there in Jerusalem, where protesters gathered in the streets, waving Israeli flags, honking horns, vuvuzelas as well. Actually, the noise was so loud with one of our correspondents, Hadas Gold, outside the Ben Gurion airport. It was almost impossible to hear her, but people are very upset, very angry about what this means, what this judicial overhaul, what this bill means for the state of democracy in Israel. A lot of people concerned that perhaps Israel is sliding towards a dictatorship. Amir Tibon, always good to have you on the show. I hope we can have you back in the near future. Very much. Amir, thank you so much. All right, still to come here, we're going to be returning to the NATO summit, a conversation with a former US ambassador to NATO in just a moment after the break.
Getting back to the people in Israel, I don't know the fundamentals. It's obviously an internal problem that they're going through. But the thing about it is, it's not just going to be Jerusalem. It's not just going to be Russia. It's not just going to be one or two countries that's going to be going through transformation periods, reforming periods right now. But it's going to be all of them. in one form or another. If the people are going to stand up in making sure that these oligarchs, regardless whether it be open oligarchs or secret society oligarchs, that has basically been not wanting to share the piece of the pie with the rest of the group of people, that it's going to be up to the people to stand up against that type of unfairness. And in the unfairness, I'm sure there's going to be bloodshed, which validates the scriptures in the King James Version Bible, the teachings of the Lord Jesus Christ. It said that in the last days that there would be uprisings, that there would be nation against nation, that there would be wars and rumors of wars, earthquakes and commotions going on like you'd never ever experienced or seen before. We're just now on the beginning phases of all this. It's happening worldwide. And what has intensified it, not just with radio and satellite and TV and smartphone technology, but what has intensified all this is COVID. People are trying to get back on their feet, and they're trying to live out some sort of normalcy of what they can remember prior to COVID, pre-COVID. But there's others that has sacrificed because of COVID, and now you're turning into a clash because now a lot of people's eyes has been opened in understanding the only way that we're going to be able to straighten this problem out is by force. Is by force. To think that the American people, our military institutions, our installations over here are going to be able to police all these problems that's going on right now simultaneously all over the planet is ludicrous for anybody to think that America is still going to be basically the referee of the world. I understand that there's going to be bloodshed. There's going to be misery. There's going to be sorrow. But also understand this. It is biblical Bible prophecy coming true pertaining to Christianity standing up against these anti-Semitist groups or people. And because of it, there's going to be confusion and there's going to be controversial moments that's going to happen in just about all the countries all over the planet. That's the reason why the Bible talks about in Revelation chapter 6, verses 1 and 2, that it was as the noise of thunder. One of the beasts in heaven said, "Come and see," because of the eruption of the occurrences that's happening on the planet right now. And like I said, we're just in the beginning phases of all this. We haven't hit the peak yet towards what's going on here, because we got nations that are imploding upon one another that never does meet national news, headline news. There's more stuff going on right now than I'm going to say was going on during World War II. And in a way, it actually has become a world war, a spiritual world war, towards now seeing these uprisings and seeing these commotions and these problems that are escalating all over the planet. In a way, it is a spiritual siege. We're under siege right now, just as the Bible talks about that in the last days, Satan will rise up because it or he knows its days are limited, are short. It is extremely, crucially imperative that people understand what is going on, why it's going on, the sole purpose for it going on, of truth and justice trying to stand on top the way that they should have been all along in dominating the untruthful and the unfair people. And it's going to take, I promise you, it's going to take bloodshed in a lot of cases for the people to rise up and to make their cases known of the importance of how they feel. Now, they have two choices. Just like the Afghanistan people, they can roll over, play dead, and say, well, we'll just give them the reins. Or they can make the same choice that the Ukrainian people are making right now towards standing up and saying, we will not give in to that type of tyranny. That's what the world in general is going to have to do, and hopefully some of these videos that I'm putting out to the public will help to initiate that. And it's not that I want to see any kind of bloodshed. It's not that I want to see all these uprisings, but I know that that's part of the package that goes along with it. Because once more, it's part of biblical Bible prophecy that in the last days it will be as the noise of thunder, to the degree that one of God's creatures that stays in heaven in honor of him will come to the edge of the throne room and look down upon to the planet and say, come and see, for it was as, didn't say it was thunder, for it was as the noise of thunder coming from the planet Earth. And there's so many issues. There's not just one issue. There's so many issues pertaining to climate, warming, money issues, education issues, gun issues, drug issues, corrupt politician issues. We got just as many corrupt politician issues over here as they do probably in some of them other countries over there, because of the way that things has been handled illegitimately, just like Donald Trump talked about, that the system over here needed to be drained. And boy, did he ever speak the truth whenever he said that. I don't agree with some of his methods that he's trying to drain the system with, but him making that statement that the system needed to be drained, especially after you've already taken this thing down this endless path of being $32 trillion in debt, and seeing all our jails being full, and all the gang activity, and all the drug activity, and all the gun activity, and all the illegal activity with the illegal immigrants coming over here. I mean, it's just a formula of disaster that I think just about a blind man could see that the system is broken over here. It's corrupt, and it's rigged, and it needs, the system needs to be drained. Well, how do you drain a swamp? You drain a swamp by letting out all the water, not just part of it. So whenever Donald Trump said that the system needs to be drained, I don't think even he, as smart as he is financially speaking, from a business perspective, I really don't think that he grasped what he was saying that needed to be done in the USA. And trust me, it needs to be done. From the local end all the way up to the White House end. What is that going to require? That's going to require a different approach in a lot of cases. It's going to require debate. It's going to require common sense values. And it's going to require morals versus a nation that has become unmoral, if we're going to take on a footing in God the Father continually blessing this great nation with beautiful landscapes, parks, beautiful forestry, nice hospitals, nice lakes, nice roads, and nice people. It's going to take a reformment to do that. And the only way to do it and do it properly is fundamentally from the inside out, which is going to require a spiritual revival or a revolution. I'm going to pick on the farmers right here just for a second by using them as an example towards the problems with Mother Nature, the forces of nature. The first thing that they wanted to go for last year in going through the droughts like we did and seeing the mighty Mississippi get as low as it did, the first thing that they wanted to go for, well, our answer to this is everybody grab up a bunch of pipe, let's dig our wells a little deeper, and let's put in irrigation systems. Well, that may be one way of handling the problem, but by handling that problem that way, you're going to be creating another problem by draining all the aqueduct systems up underneath our feet to the degree that now people that does have wells, their wells are going to be running dry. Thank God in this particular area that there was adequate rains for the agricultural community by and large, that they didn't have to all jump on board at one time towards draining all the water supplies, the resources out of the ground. Because now you're going to exchange one problem for even a worser problem. I understand that farmers have to make a living. I understand that farmers have to have profits at the end of the year. If not, they're not going to be able to stay in business for very long. But the part that I'm trying to say is this. By beating the horse on the wrong end can actually create more of a problem than what it would have been if you would have beat the horse on the right end. I've seen America do this again and again and again, regardless whether it was the educational system, regardless whether it was the right for birthrights or the right of all these other things that they're arguing and complaining and bickering about. I've seen them go in the left field again and again and again versus going to the right. And what people don't understand is we have already done something to ourselves pertaining to the oil typhoons that has drained oil out of this ground and is still draining massive amount of oil out of this ground every day. That is disturbing the ecosystem below our feet. As the ecosystem becomes more and more disturbed, we're going to see more consequences on those disturbances, regardless whether it be the ice melting and the penguins and the polar bears up north not having a stable place to no longer reside in, or the whales or the sharks biting people because they know that it's human consumption that is causing this. And they're retaliating against human beings, or regardless whether it be earthquakes and volcanoes. I think another volcano erupted yesterday over in Iceland, if I'm not mistaken. It may have been Ireland, but it was another volcano that went off, and they said that this one really wasn't that substantial because it was in an unpopulated area. But anytime you see these volcanoes that are erupting on the level that they're erupting, something obviously is going on below our feet that is abnormal, because the intensity of these eruptions that are happening has increased in the past 25-30 years over 300% compared to what the rates was years and years ago versus what the rates are, what the data proof is today. And that's in addition to seeing how much more severe that the storms have become, or how much more severe that the droughts have become, or how much more severe that the hurricanes have become, or how much more severe, or how much more severe that they've come in entities. You know, they talked a couple of days ago up towards Maine and New York, of them getting a deluge and getting about, I think it was like 8 inches of water in like 6 hours, and how that they've had historical 1,000-year flooding is how that they headed that 1,000-year flooding. Well, we used to think that a Category 5 hurricane was like a 500-year deal. But whenever you have hurricane after hurricane after hurricane, year after year after year, and you're steadily being bombarded by these Category 4 and Category 5 hurricanes, you take the normalcy of what we used to have a record of, and now you throw that away and you create a new record. That's the reason why almost every day when you turn on the weather, in some form or fashion, they'll tell you it's a breaking record event. We broke records over here towards it being this time of the year, towards it being this hot. Or we've broken records over here with the cold front to come all the way down to Brownsville, Texas, that caused a freeze out, and God only knows how many people died of that event, and God only knows how much monetarily money that it costed the people, even the businesses that costed them so much money because of the irregularities that's going on with the weather. These are all predictions that the Bible talks about that will occur in not just the last days, but the final last days. See, we have seen, and Jesus used it as a example in a farmer planting a seed of corn, that first you have the seed that comes up, you have the stalk, you have one ear, then you have another ear, and then you have the tossling pertaining to how it progresses in germination of whether or not you got a little ear or a big ear. But then whenever harvest has come, according to Jesus' teachings, that's whenever God putteth in the sickle. You can look at that seed being Jesus, and you can take that seed, looking at it from generation to generation, from decade to decade, going all the way back 2,000 years ago, towards one big plant of corn. And now we're getting into the final season, which is different than what the last day seasons was. They preached the last day season in the 1800s. And you know what? The season that they preached, during the time that they preached it, was on the money. That's the reason why the Word of God is called the living Word of God, is because it rotates, it evolves in accordance to the actual events that's occurring today. And the scriptures that people interpreted 200 years ago in preaching the same message of the last day message, they interpreted those scriptures in the same Bible that you and me read today, possibly a different way, based upon their knowledge and based upon their experiences and based upon the circumstances that was going on in their lives at the time. Does that mean that they interpreted the scriptures inaccurately? No. They was on the money of the time that they interpreted what they interpreted with the last day message. Once more, fulfilling that first ear and then that second ear before the stalk ever begins to tossle. We're in the tossling procedures right now of that germination that's going to explode all over the world pertaining to the gospel. Right now I ain't talking about politics. I ain't talking about economics. I'm talking about religion. I'm talking about God. There is such of a divine movement right now that's happening in people's lives that it is literally turning into a spiritual warfare with countries, just like you just got to seeing over in Israel, and countries going on right now over Ukraine and countries going on all over the world, especially this one right here in America, towards seeing these commotions, seeing these uproars, seeing what we're seeing right now. We have walked into another era that the Bible talks about in the final last day era. I don't preach the last day message. I preach the final last day message. You know why I preach the final last day message? Because God has showed me we are no longer living in the last day message, but we are living in the final last day message towards that corn now has started its ears towards fulfilling itself, becoming mature, but it's only going to become mature whenever it tassels and whenever it fully pollinates the way it's supposed to pollinate. So we are basically in a pollinating state right now, looking at it globally, spiritually speaking. We are in a spiritual pollinating state. And in this spiritual pollinating state pertaining to the final last days, you are going to see uprisings, you are going to see commotions, you are going to see wars and rumors of wars, just like the Bible talks about, until the Christian society finally gets a footing and they realize what we're up against and what's going on here, and we unite together in the form of a revival that will unify into a revolution. Once more, you don't start trying to clean the cup from the outside in, but you start from the inside out. I had it explained to me just the other day, to come to the Lord pertaining to your salvation. That's totally different than a revival. A revival happens to the people that's already had a relationship with the Lord. But now they're coming into a different realm of understanding and knowing the differences in what they thought was okay in doing, to the degree of now today knowing the things that they're doing they shouldn't be doing. So the church needs a revival. And the way that it gets a revival is by going back to the altar, just like the Bible talks about in Revelations, the first 4 chapters. Go back. It says, go back, go back, go back. For I've not found thy works perfect yet. Go back. That word the word go back, in terminology speaking, means revive yourself. Come to an awakening towards where that you have been and where God wants us to be. And that requires a spiritual movement from within that only happens in the form of a revival. We're not talking about a revival over here in one community. I think they had a revival a few months ago, maybe a year or so ago, up towards eastern Kentucky, and they claim that people over there was being slain in the spirit, and it was a movement like they've never seen. As far as I know, I hadn't heard nothing else about that revival. As far as I know, I don't know if that revival's still going on. I don't know if that revival diminished. I don't know if that revival got stronger. I don't think it got no stronger, because if it did, I think I'd be seeing stuff on Facebook or YouTube about it. But in most cases, most things that happen are very short-lived because they didn't take deep root. What America and the world's fixing to go through is going to alter the way that we think, the way that we live, and the way that we want to treat others. And that's going to require a supernatural movement, spiritual movement from within, that's going to alter the world in a much, much better place than what it was before pre-COVID. Now, between that gap of where we are now versus the gap where God wants us to be, I don't know the distance of that gap. It talks about that he gave her space to repent. I don't know how far, either days, months, or years that we're looking at of the distances of that space. But it says that he gave her space to repent. In that space is where we are right now in reforming. The only way that we're going to reform is allow for God, the supernatural, of entering back into our lives, or becoming more powerful or more predominant in our lives, in cleaning our act up. Just as the Bible teaches that he has not yet found our works perfect yet. So we're actually in the pollinated, tossing state towards the church purifying itself, the bridegroom for the bride. Because whenever the bride comes back, whenever the bridegroom comes back for the bride, he's going to be coming back for a group of people that are longing for his return. He's going to be coming back for a group of people that are going to be, their garments is going to be swept clean, and that he's going to be coming back for a powerful church and not a weakened, diminished, beaten down church. He's going to be coming back for a strong group of people that are willing to sacrifice their lives the same as others before us has sacrificed theirs. Because it specifically says that in the book of Luke. I think it's 8 and 8 maybe. I don't know. I don't have the Bible in front of me right now. But somewhere in the book of Luke it talks about that whenever the Lord shall return, talking about the second coming, talking about the first global resurrection. Whenever the Lord returns to gather up his elect from the four corners of the earth, shall he find faith upon to the planet. What type of faith? Endearing, wholesome, 100% committed faith. Because I know that I'm not going to leave this world alive. And to be quite frank with you, ain't nothing that I look at that I tangibly can see, including my own flesh and bones, that are going to remain forever. Because basically everything that I look at is temporal, including my own flesh and bones. Because whenever it talks about in the Bible that God will recreate a new heaven and a new earth, in order to recreate a new earth, that means he's going to have to destroy the old earth, or allow for the humans to destroy it for him. So that means that everything that you're looking at presently in the year 2023, I don't care if it's a river, I don't care if it's a mountain, I don't care if it's a gorge, I don't care if it's a city like Mexico City or China or New York City or LA, everything that you're looking at pertaining to cars, automobiles, buildings, etc., is all going to be destroyed. Because in order to recreate a new heaven and a new earth, you got to do away with the old heaven and the old earth. This is where we are right now. We are in a pollination stage as Christian church needs to clean up their act. And the only way that you can do that is supernaturally, and us sticking together and understanding that the Bible does talk about the meek inheriting the earth. And I've had various theologians and teachers and preachers tell me, well, that's talking spirituality speaking, whenever God is going to allow for the meek to inherit the earth. That begins with us today, my friends. Because if we don't have the umption to stand up, just like I was looking at, a lot of those soldiers looked like that they was as old, if not older than me. But then again, a lot of them was young men that I seen that was fighting on the front lines. But if we don't have the umption of making the ultimate sacrifice, even if we make people angry at us, even if society turns against us, even if our own government classifies us as being a could-be, would-be terrorist, that's what we need to do. We need to stand up for the things that we know that are decent, righteous, and true, the same as our ancestors did several hundred years ago. In other words, we're in the battle. We're fixing to get in the thick of it. And it's not just going to be here in America, but it's going to be all the other countries all over the world, including China, including Russia. There's going to be a movement. There's going to be a battle, a spiritual battle. And in the process of this spiritual battle, according to biblical Bible prophecy, God's people is going to come out on top. Now, between that actually occurring, towards where we are presently today, towards it actually accomplishing itself, may take 2 years, may take 3 years, may take 5 years, may take 7 or 8 years, may take 20 years, I don't know. And what's going to go on between now and then could actually be horrifying in a lot of different people's lives. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty well certain that it's going to be. And I'm just not talking about gun violence here in America. I'm just not talking about bombs being whirled at you if you're at the wrong place over in Ukraine. But I'm talking about worldwide. That it's going to take a worldwide spiritual movement to put these demons in their place. Because the Bible specifically says to rejoice, not because the spirits are subject unto us, but rather rejoice because our names is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. But keep in mind what the first part of that scripture says. For the spirits are subject unto us. The only way that those spirits are going to be subject unto us is to stand up and do the proper and right thing. And that's the reason why the Ukrainian people are standing up and doing the proper and right thing. The Afghanistan people, God bless their souls. I feel so sorry for the women and children over there. But I feel so sorry for them because they did not stand up and do the proper and right thing. But it's going to take sacrifice. It's going to take a movement. Regardless of what continent you're on, regardless of what side of the planet that you're on. And in the process of this movement, there's going to be calamities that has already been predicted that's going to occur. Once more, America cannot police the whole world. We can only give an example towards who we are and what we are, and hopefully in that example, others will want to follow our footsteps. And it's going to take the leadership and the power of the Holy Spirit to be able to motivate anybody in wanting to follow after God, because I can't save them and they can't save me. The Bible is very, very clear that we did not choose the Father, but rather the Father chose us. And it is the leadership of the Holy Spirit that leads people back to the altar, that leads people back to the cross, that's going to formulate this movement. This movement that we begin as a revival that will elevate into a revolution. Now, people locally in this area, they can continue to ignore me. They can continue to snarl up their nose at me. They can continue to drive by here and race up their motors and display themselves in a violent, angrily type way. Or they can get on board pertaining to what God is trying to do. Not what Juby is trying to do, but what God is trying to do. I'm only a vessel. And everyone else that's a true follower of Christ is the same thing. They are only a vessel, regardless whether it's a female vessel or a male vessel. And you keep in mind that our time is short. We only have now a certain amount of time to work. We work while the harvest is plentiful. For the labors be few, the Bible says. Now is the time for those labors to get out and hit the streets. Start passing out Bible literature. Start helping people that needs help, because there's so many people right now that their lives has fallen apart because of whatever reason. Especially in some of the war-torn areas, more so than the unwar-torn areas. But us here in America are going through a war, a spiritual war, pertaining to all the hardship that has fallen upon to we the people. Please, if there's ever been a time for you to take your hands out of the backside of you sitting on and you getting up and becoming an active activist in this movement, today is the time to do that, regardless whether you be an American or you be a Russian or you be over in China or wherever. Today is that time for you to no longer continue to keep your head in the sand like an ostrich. Where would the turtle be if it never stuck its head out? It would obviously still be sitting in the same spot, because the only way that I know of a turtle that starts moving is whenever its arms comes out and its shell opens up and its neck comes out and its head sticks out and it then starts moving. Where would the turtle be if it never stuck its head out? It would still be sitting in the same spot. Now, is this a similar equation towards which come first, the chicken or the egg? No. No, to me, that is a illegitimate statement to begin with, or question, because we know that it was God that created the chicken. Just like we know it was God that created man. That would be like saying, well, which come first, the infant baby or the adult? Well, it's obvious in what that answer is. The adult come before the other infants come after the adult. So which did come first, the chicken or the egg? The chicken did. The chicken did. Who created the chicken? God did. People's going to have to wisen up, and they're going to have to wake up, and they're going to have to be active if we're going to get through this. If not, it's only going to get worse.
People were killed in a helicopter crash earlier today. Their bodies have been recovered from a rural area near Mount Everest and are being moved to the capital, Kathmandu. The helicopter was carrying 5 Mexican passengers and a Nepali pilot on a carrier that typically caters to tourists. The cause of the crash is not yet known. Record-breaking rainfall has now left at least 6 people dead and 5 more missing in Japan's southwest region. A persistent downpour since the start of July has caused flooding and landslides. And some well-known Western companies are being outed, accused of breaking their promises to leave or scale back their operations and presence in Russia after Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. A group of researchers at Yale say that big names like Heineken, Unilever, Nestle, among others, are still doing business there. The research was shared exclusively with CNN's Matt Egan. He joins us live now. So, Matt, I think
I want to end this because this has already been seen. I've already recorded this. Basically, they're just repeating themselves. They may put a little twist to it, a little different ways here and there, but it's basically the same subject matter and what that they was talking about, which is response to what I'm talking about. Those that want to listen and to some of my viewing base and what I'm talking about. To me, after this length of time, American companies or even foreign countries in general, it don't matter if it's American countries or it's Italian countries or whatever, for them to have observed this for this length of time and they're still being a participant, profiteering off of whatever business that they had in that area, to me, instead of them being a solution to the problem, they're actually part of the problem. And in lots of cases, they should actually be looked upon as being traitors. Because I'm not going to support anything that supports somebody that's going to willfully kill innocent men, women, and children by targeting them. I don't care if it's in Yemen. I don't care if it's in Russia. I don't care if it's over in America. I don't care if it's in China or wherever. I am not going to support a group of people that is going to go after innocent lives, because that's not of God. God and God's people has always taken out the bad, not the bad towards taking out the good. Obviously, somebody got the wires crossed whenever I moved back here in 2014 towards a whole group of people that basically my brother and I went to war with, the community, in them thinking that I was the bad guy. I was the black horse instead of the white horse. How confusing can it be whenever you're standing in front of a federal judge that was threatening to put a Class E felony onto your life because you wanted to see the death and destruction of this evil demonic, not just being, but this evil demonic person that's now living in a body the same as ours? How cruel can anybody be that wants to justify the acts of evil? I've always thought that America was always about a righteous God and not an unrighteous God. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And it was so humiliating of me having to go through what I went through pertaining to land between the lakes up in western Kentucky. It was so humiliating in what I had to go through in 2010, much less the toss off in what I had to go through again in 2012. The 2010 event costed me 6 months, and the 2012 event costed me almost a year over 2 non-threatening telephone calls. Now, you can't tell me that society over here has not been twisted. They're upside down, and rather than them being against people that's against the acts of evil, they should be supporting the people, because our system is based around a system of going after people that violates not necessarily the principles of God, but our laws is based off of the principles of God. Our laws is not thou shalt kill over here, pertaining to rootless individuals that want to get out here and kill people and us award them of medals and stuff because they killed somebody. The way our system is set up over here, if you kill somebody, you're going to pay the ultimate punishment for it. It's called capital punishment. We're against thieves. We're against rapists. We're against robberies. We're against liars. We're against the things that the devil tries to promote as them being good. And we are for the things that the Heavenly Father says that are good. This is where society has come over here in America for the past 30 plus years, and it has allowed the enemy to not just get in front of the gate, but get in the coop, and now the enemy is devouring the chickens. Our churches has become so lame in their teachings and their understanding of the Bible and how the people are supposed to live and how they're not supposed to live. It has become just as Jesus taught, that if salt has lost its potency in being salt, what good is it other than to be trampled down by the foot of man? And that's sad. It's a sad state that we're in right now, but that's the state that we're in. Because whenever they attacked me again and again and again over me standing up for the ways of righteousness, I knew then that something was entirely wrong, especially at the cost of my younger brother. Especially at the cost of my younger only sibling, that the courts in Weakley County are going to give an account for, regardless whether they like to or not, in the hereafter. Because they are just as guilty as if they themselves was out here driving around and harassing us and haunting us and taunting us and tormenting our lives the way that they was doing for 3 consecutive years, from 2014 to 2017, until my brother finally died. As far as I'm concerned, it was Tommy Moore himself that was in that truck with Donald Ridgeway, that was out here screaming and hollering and falsely accusing my brother and I of all these accusations. As far as I'm concerned, it was Johnson that was in those vehicles, that was out here screaming and hollering and tormenting our lives day after day after day. As far as I'm concerned, it was Mike Wilson, the sheriff of this county that had been elected 9 different times, that was driving around in these vehicles, that was tormenting my brother and my life for 3 consecutive years until he finally died. It was Judge Pence and other law enforcement agencies in this area that was in behind this. Because they could have stopped it. They could have stopped it before I even come back here in 2014, pertaining to the aggravations that was going on with the family feud down here in Northwest Tennessee and Weakley County. But did they? Nope. Why didn't they? Because they didn't give a rat's ass about Bobby Jackson, James Robert Jackson's family. Because James Robert Jackson was a descendant from not only Kelmer Jackson, but a descendant from Jeff Jackson. And society around here was so messed up that turned on my great-great-grandfather, that decided, pertaining to the generational curses, towards tormenting our lives just as well. You don't think that I'm smart enough to know what's been going on all throughout my life? You don't think that I'm very aware towards the people that are very aware of my case and my family? You are only deceiving yourselves, regardless whether you live on the right or the left, east or west, north or even south. Those that has heard about this situation down here at 291 Thompson Road, Sharon, Tennessee, zip code 38255. You are only deceiving yourself if you think that you're not going to be held to the full extent of God's laws. May not be nothing that I can do pertaining to man-made laws, but what I can do is take my hands and get them from out from underneath my rear end and get off my rear end. And if I have to, roll up my sleeves, just like I did by going to Waco, Mount Carmel, and Oklahoma, and finding out the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, and then exposing that truth as a whistleblower. If that's what it takes, then that's what it takes. And that's the only way that you're going to ruffle some feathers. Good luck to all of us. As I end this program by saying, God bless America, God bless our troops, and heaven help us all. Heaven help us all.